respected chairpersons, very senior members of our association, and my good old friend from Delhi, Professor Chaudhary. Now, my topic is paraneoplastic neurological syndrome. I'll try to cover the syndrome and I'll try to present one or two of my case as time permits. Now, what is paraneoplastic neurological syndrome? It is a dysfunction of organ or systems associated with neoplastic disease, but not related to local growth of the tumor or metastasis or adverse anti-cancer drug reactions. And it occurs in areas that are not directly affected by malignant tumor. And if we go further, it may affect every organ of the human nervous system, both central, peripheral, or the autonomic. The symptoms are caused by a neoplastic process in other organ or system and usually precede the development of the cancer. So I will show you in one of my cases that how it precedes the development of the cancer and how one has to look for elaboration of the case. Looking at the markers, the different markers respond to antineoplastic therapy. The different markers I will describe and usually disappear after the treatment of the underlying disease. They also tend to be detectable again in case of relapsing. If there is a relapse of the neoplasm, then again the markers has got a rise. And you can say that these are also a useful indicator of the response to the applied treatment and provide an information of the patient's prognosis. So in that way, the paraneoplastic marker helps. Now look at this patient, a 67-year-old male presented with progressive loss of balance, tingling and numbness of all four limbs, and also a remarkable weight loss. Chronic smoker for more than 20 years, denies alcohol, no significant past medical history. On examination, difficulty in buttoning of shorts, loss of balance while walking on uneven surface, reflexes absent, and sensory impairment, vibration in hands and feet, and Rombax positive. So it is a clear-cut case of peripheral neuropathy, more of a sensory rather than motor. So we elaborate the metabolic profile, and it was found to be normal. Even the electrophoresis was normal. The NCB, it shows severe sensory motor axonal neuropathy. So what we are dealing with is a case of sensory ataxia and a setting of peripheral neuropathy, lower extremity weakness, and with motor axonal involvement. Naturally, tests for the common antibodies in the serum associated with the paraneoplastic process that were done, but it came to be normal. No abnormality was found. Now, what about the CSF paraneoplastic antibody? If the serum is positive, looking for the CSF paraneoplastic antibody does not give you any further benefit. CSF, if you come across any inflammatory finding like pleocytosis, increased protein, or oligoclonal bands, give more weight to the immune-mediated paraneoplastic syndrome. So, CSF in that way it may be helpful. Now paraneoplastic panel negative, the patient was evaluated for CT chest, abdomen, pelvis, normal. Then FDG PET was done, it turned out to be normal. Now what will you do with this patient? Repeat paraneoplastic screening after 3 to 4 months. How long to screen? So that is the question. The current recommendation is that you go for screening in these patients every 6 months, at least for 4 years, before it turns out to be non-paraneoplastic syndrome. And looking at the management, the prevent progression of the neuropathy, IVIG, corticosteroid, plasma exchange, these are the different methods of treatment of the paraneoplastic syndrome. Now, what are the most common paraneoplastic neurological syndrome that we come across? Limbic encephalitis, subacute cerebellar degeneration, opsoclonus myoclonus, Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome, and dermatomyositis. These are the 5 major manifestations of paraneoplastic syndrome. What about looking at the encephalitis? The first identified and described neurological disorder with a confirmed cancerous background. Look at the last sentence. Limbic encephalitis is most often accompanied by an increased expression of anti-NMDA receptor antibodies and affects mainly women with ovarian teratoma. What is the second most common tumor? Is associated with small cell lung cancer. If we proceed further, then this subacute cerebral, for want of time, I want to cover each and every aspect of the PNS. Now, subacute cerebellar degeneration is a disorder of the nervous system that affects the Purkinje cells in the cerebellar cortex. Purkinje cells are large, multipolar neurons that you all know. Now, this paraneoplastic subacute cerebellar syndrome most often is associated with an increased level of anti-EO antibodies and occurs in women with breast and ovarian cancers. And sometimes it can be associated with Hodgkin's lymphoma and urinary or the bladder cancer. If we proceed further, the symptoms are progressive ataxia of the trunk and limbs, nausea, dizziness, and double vision. The patient's speech is slow, indistinct, aphonic, and in the course of illness, the symptoms evolve, memory and swallowing disorders may be noticed. Looking at the anti-YO antibodies, if onconeuronal antibodies are detected, the diagnosis of ovarian cancer and breast cancer is obligatorily needed. So, you have to frantically search for these two neoplasms. And approximately 50% of subacute cerebellar degeneration cases are associated with the above mentioned tumors. Looking at the opsoclonus myoclonus syndrome, it is a paraneoplastic disorder. Now, in case of children, we know that it is present in 2 to 3% of children with neuroblastoma, that is known. Now, in case of adults, the opsoclonus myoclonus syndrome is very rare, usually appears in the first clinical manifestations of breast, lung, or ovarian cancer. So, that may be a first clinical presentation of these tumors. This syndrome may be idiopathic, less likely may be a symptom of brainstem encephalitis, as well as metabolic or toxic. So, a host of condition can present with opsoclonus myoclonus syndrome. Without going into the detail, what is opsoclonus myoclonus? Is a spontaneous, irregular, multifactorial, conjugated with fast eye movements. It's almost a chaotic eye movement. And myoclonus syndrome involves an involuntary short-lasting cramps of individual muscles or muscle groups, as the myoclonus itself defines. So, for this reason, the disease is also known as dancing eye and dancing feet, and other symptoms are lethargy, irritability, strabismus, cerebellar ataxia, and aphasia. And next come to the Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome. It is a much discussed. It's the disease characterized by a disturbance in a transmission of impulses from the nervous system to the skeletal muscle. The reason of such disorder is an inappropriate function of the calcium channels in the presynaptic membrane. In about 60% of cases, it develops in people suffering from malignant tumors, most often against small cell lung cancer or large intestine, although it may also occur in the course of other cancers like breast, prostate, or stomach. The disease develops usually after the age of 40, and its symptoms often precede the diagnosis of cancer. Again, it precedes the diagnosis of cancer. And confirmation by EMG, complete oncological diagnosis should be performed to detect cancer. It includes, as I have explained earlier, chest CT, colonoscopy, mammography, gynecological examination, and also prostate cancer evaluation. In the differential diagnosis, of course, myasthenia has to be thought of. And in case of, we know that Lambert-Eaton myasthenia syndrome is normally known as post-tetanic potentiation. That is, with small activity, there is improvement in the skeletal muscle function. Then comes the dermatomyositis. It is an inflammatory disease in which changes affect especially the muscles of the shoulder and the pelvic girdle. So, it's a proximal myopathy, and it is associated with erythema, edema, and localized mainly in the face and the limbs. In about 50% cases, In people over 40 years of age, dermatomyositis is accompanied by a neoplasm of the internal organ. And there is an increased risk with ovarian, lung, stomach, and Hodgkin's cancer. In significant part of cases, dermatomyositis precedes the proliferative process, which is found later. Then on the skin of the hands, over the small joints, as the rheumatologists are there, they know that the Gottron symptom, then the so-called the Scholl symptoms in the neck, and there are erythematous lesions and petechiae in the nail ducts. So these are the manifestations of the dermatomyositis. Without going into the detail, these may manifest, it may precede the development of detection of cancer. And it is often associated with high fever, generalized muscular weakness. Without going into the details of the dermatomyositis feature, it is better that we should look for the other malignant processes that are present. There is another component is mechanic's hand. The skin of the hand may become hard, so-called the mechanic's hand. It also often precedes the diagnosis of a cancer. Now, a second case. A 71-year-old right-handed woman presented with vertigo, diplopia, and ataxia for 4 weeks. The patient is wheelchair bound. Significant past history of breast cancer 16 years back. MRI brain normal, CT chest, abdomen, and pelvis is normal. So there is no recurrence, no metastasis. A PNS antibody screening, PC1 anti-O antibody positive. There is in the CSF, there is increased cell count. And if PET, this time it revealed a complex left ovarian mass. And the biopsy, it proved that it is a serous carcinoma of the fallopian tube. The patient was successfully treated with surgery and this treatment, the anti-cancer drugs. Now there is improvement in the gait. Despite freedom from subsequent neoplasm, she continued to have period of neurologic deterioration. A variety of immunosuppressants were tried and ultimately patient was controlled with cyclophosphamide. My point of presenting this patient is that in spite of the initial neoplasm getting completely cured, the patient had successive deterioration in neurological status. Is one form of presentation of paraneoplastic syndrome. So if paraneoplastics with antibodies targeting intracellular antigen is positive, prognosis is often guarded and patients require long-term immunosuppression. Because most of the patients diagnosed with paraneoplastic syndrome will not develop cancer at the time, so screening and observation for a tumor is highly recommended. Now these are the host of antibodies that has been mentioned. It is better not to go through each and every. Now these antibodies associated with paraneoplastic, you will find it in the books. I don't think that repetition of these is necessary. So these are the different antibodies that has been detected, different cancers and different manifestations. Again, probably when I am discussing, maybe more antibody has been described by this time. So the length is actually increasing. Without going into the detail and just remembering, committing, vomiting, better you go through the books, I think it will be. Now, algorithm for the diagnosis and management of paraneoplastic neurological syndrome. If you suspect a PNS, if it is, do a paraneoplastic panel of antibodies. So if it is negative or positive, if it is positive, look for cancer corresponding to antibody, and this is the flow chart. The cancer found not corresponding to the antibody, treat the cancer, or if it is found or unfound. So this is the algorithm by which if you suspect a case of paraneoplastic neurological syndrome, you will try to elaborate and repeat the test, and as you progress and the different parameters that you look for. Now the take-home message in this discussion is that these immune-mediated paraneoplastic neurological syndromes are important predictive as well as diagnostic factor for internal organ cancers. And early identification may help in the diagnosis of the tumor and choice of proper treatment. The detection of Antineuronal antibodies indicates the necessity of oncological diagnostics, and many authors emphasize the significance of paraneoplastic syndromes in modern oncology so that you can plan treatment. As the number of patients with cancer still increases, the incidence of PNS will also confidently upsurge. Due to this reason, the knowledge of the PNS and their mechanism is very important in contemporary medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. Beautiful discussion. I think there may be some questions over. Dr. Sarkar, please.
How does this paraneoplastic dermatomyositis differ from the, because we had 2 cases of dermatomyositis with presented with the ovarian. The usual presentation of this neck muscle was not there, and the girdle muscle. What is your
The
opinion?
dermatomyositis that are associated with the PNS, it typically presents with the proximal myopathy, as I have mentioned. The shoulder and the pelvic girdle muscles, they are involved. The skin changes are there, the typical Gottron symptoms and the Scholl symptoms, everything is there. So this PNS dermatomyositis and the rheumatological dermatomyositis is very difficult to differentiate. So they may mimic only a clinical suspicion. If a patient is above 40, coming with, normally the childhood dermatomyositis is a separate entity. If it comes in the elderly age group, always we should look for the paraneoplastic markers.
There is
It is a
some
must.
remission with the
Yes.
remission of the disease.
No, if the immunosuppression is done with the paraneoplastic marker will definitely come down, but at the same time you have to treat the original neoplastic process, otherwise it will not improve.
One thing is that when a dermatomyositis doesn't respond to adequate amount of steroids being given, one should suspect that it's a paraneoplastic.
Right.
Actually, this malignancy can come out later on. We had a patient who we could find out that patient has colonic carcinoma after 3 years of diagnosis of dermatomyositis. Now, I just make a small comment. Comment is that Anupda has nicely discussed everything, because this paraneoplastic syndrome, so they are mostly due to these antigens which are intracellularly situated, and they are actually mostly attacked by T cells. So these syndromes are mostly T cell mediated. So that's why, as Anupda has rightly told, the treatment is very, very difficult, and Anupda has shown few cases which has improved. But what we find is in autoimmune encephalitis, the antigens are mostly extracellular, and they are basically immune mediated. So that's why it is very easy to attack this antibody mediated, and you can treat with this immunosuppressant very easily. So true paraneoplastic neurological syndrome is very difficult to treat, and if you get an intracellular antigen, you may have to follow the patient up to 3-4 years, even 5 years, whether the patient has got an inherent malignancy or not.
That's why I have shown these two
Yeah,
cases.
shown, I have told you.
These 2 cases. One, how long to elaborate? How long
is
you
very
will
difficult.
search for? The current recommendation goes that every 6 months for 4 years. And another, I have shown that even when the neoplastic process has been recovered, the patient continues to deteriorate. So that is another facet. So 2 facets of I have mentioned.
Bhaskar, I think you remember one place we have shown in medical college in the neuro club, one lady having dermatomyositis. who
Yeah,
developed
that's actually-
colonic carcinoma
Yeah,
after 2
that-
years.
that I told,
After
yeah.
2 years she developed colonic carcinoma. Thank you for everybody for a nice session, vibrating session. Well, thank you everybody.
Can you, Devasista, can you give me just 2 minutes? Just give me 2 minutes. Only 2 minutes, 2 minutes. West Bengal branch of API is trying hard to come out with a journal. Huh? কি হলো? খুলে এলাম তো The last 5 years, I have been assigned with the post of looking at this journal, and I got tremendous help from the different contributors. Everyone is helping me. I was trying very hard to get it indexed. It took a long time. After several correspondence, etc., and with the significant help from the members. Now, first we got the ISSN number, and after that, 3 different indexing authorities. These are all international authorities. They have given, it's not moving. It's not moving. No, it's not moving. Just, oh. So this is Euro-Asian Society of Journaling Index. Then the middle one, it is a Science Citation Service. This is again an international concern, and this is another DRGI. This is also an international. So they have all indexed our journal. Now we are looking for further progression, that is the PubMed and etc. Come down. As you can see, that these are the most read articles, as has been documented from the indexing society. So I have got a request for everyone, please contribute, otherwise I won't be able to survive. During my past days, I must thank the contributors. Especially, I have been able to collect papers from All India Institute of Medical Science, Delhi. They have contributed. I have got paper from Nellore Medical College, Andhra. I have found paper from Shanda Kamath. They have definitely helped me to survive. And in my state, I will be failing in my duties if I do not mention the name of Professor R.N. Sarkar. Whenever there was some sort of difficulty, I asked his help, and he helped me a lot by not only contributing by himself, but also he has involved his students. I owe a great deal to Professor R.N. Sarkar. I definitely remember Professor S.B. Ganguly. He has contributed probably each and every issue had a contribution from him. So I look forward to all your support so that we can move further. Thank you very much, and thank you, the West Bengal branch of API, for giving me this opportunity to bring out this edition for the last 5 years.